All right, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so the agenda for today. I will give a little overview about the Department of Financial Protection and Innovation, which is the administrator for the CalMoneySmart grant program. And then I'll go over a quick overview of the CalMoneySmart program, timeline and deadlines for this fiscal year, and then I'll open it up for questions at the end of the presentation. Okay, so welcome to the CalMoneySmart webinar. My name is Jeff Gelsma. I'm the grant analyst with the DFPI. And if you're not familiar with the DFPI, we are a California state department under the Business, Consumer Services and Housing Agency. Our main mission is to protect consumers, foster trust, innovation, and fairness in the financial marketplace. So I like to think of us as the state's financial services regulator. The main focus is consumer protection education, making sure consumers understand financial products before they purchase them, know their rights, and help avoid becoming a victim of financial fraud. The DFPI is especially focused on the most vulnerable populations of the state, such as seniors, students, military service members, immigrants, and new Californians. The department works closely with state and federal agencies to investigate claims of financial abuse, fraud. We oversee licensees and ensure financial service providers are following the law. And we also foster innovation by encouraging development of responsible financial tools that help all Californians thrive. So I think the most pertinent thing would be like fintech or mobile transaction kind of things that we oversee as a department. And so the DFPI's role is all these different things listed here. We have the authority to pass laws regulating financial services, and people and companies who are providing financial services in California, they have to be licensed with the department. So we have teams of examiners for different kinds of licensees, attorneys, investigators internally who work to ensure that everyone's providing legal financial services. And at the end there, we also manage the CalMoneySmart grants, which I will be going to on the next slide. So the CalMoneySmart program was established in October 2019 when the Financial Empowerment Fund was signed into law with the Senate Bill 455. So initially, the fund was seeded with $4 million, and we were able to grant up to $1 million per year, with individual grants up to $100,000. Recently, in July of 2021, Assembly Bill 137 increased that financial empowerment fund by $10 million, which also increased the annual award amounts up to $2 million and individual grants up to $200,000. So that is fully available for this coming RFP. So I encourage you to think big and go for the amount that your organization needs. Obviously, the CalMoneySmart program is focusing on serving unbanked and underbanked households in California. And unbanked means someone who hasn't had a bank account in 12 months or more. Underbanked, it means someone who's using alternative financial services such as payday loans or something like that. So we're really trying to increase financial wellness and make sure that we can get these folks into bank accounts. Eligible programs for the CalMoneySmart grant program, 3 different categories. So You can either just, and they all have to be free and open to the public. So you can either design, develop, or offer some kind of free classroom or web-based financial education content, or you can provide individualized coaching, or you can design, develop, or offer a free financial product or service. You could do one of these things. You could do all of them. It's up to you and your organizational capacity and your programs. But in order to be eligible for the grant program, you have to do at least one of these. And also, in order to be eligible, organizations must be a 501c3 registered nonprofit in California. And pretty simple eligibility requirements there. So in terms of the deadlines and timeline, the 28th of February, the grant application was officially launched. So if you have not been able to sign up and register on our new grant portal, I encourage you to do so. It's available on the CalMoneySmart website. You can just click right there, it'll be available to you. The 29th of April is when the deadline to submit the grant applications. So there's no leniency on the deadline. The application will close at the close of business on the 29th of April. So please be sure to get those applications in before that deadline. And then in July of this year, we hope to notify grantees of their selection for the funding. And then by August, we hope to disperse the grant funding so that your programs can get launched. And then, yeah, I mentioned the new application portal. So this will be our third cycle of the program. So we're finally able to launch a grant application portal so you can register and save your progress as you go instead of having to kind of submit everything all in one go. It's important to know you can only submit one application per cycle, but you do have the ability on this new portal that if you were to submit before the deadline and you caught something that you wanted to change, you were able to change the application before the deadline. So if you have any issues, this is a new portal, so we're definitely anticipating some glitches or issues maybe coming up. Please feel free to email the program at calmoneysmart@dfpi.ca.gov, which is right here at the start here box on the portal. If you have any issues with signing in or logging in or submitting your documents or anything like that. And yeah, all the applicant documents must be submitted through this portal. We're not going to be accepting any applications via email or anything else like that. So I'll go over some frequently asked questions that we have about the program. These questions come up every year, so I thought I would just answer them right now before we get into our question and answer section. So can grant funding be used for incentives? So by incentives, we mean like financial incentives. Like, can we use a portion of the budget to open bank accounts for participants and give them $100 for their bank account? While that's a great idea, given that our funding is from the state, we cannot be using that for financial incentives. So please be cognizant of that when you're submitting your applications. That will not be okay. So number two, can funding be used for educating/training local small businesses? Yes, the answer is yes. You can definitely use the funding for small business support, just as long as those small businesses are primarily folks that are either unbanked or underbanked, or some kind of demographic that falls in those under those definitions. So it just needs to be focused on our targeted communities if you're going to be using the funding for local small businesses. But otherwise, it's great. You can totally do that. Number 3, are grants reviewed on a rolling first come basis through April 29th, or all applications submitted by the deadline reviewed collectively after the deadline? So all of the applications will be reviewed after the deadline. There'll be a review for eligibility, which will be the first sort of thing. We're just going to be looking at, are you submitting all your documents? Are you a 501c3 nonprofit? Do you have programming that's in line with our program? And then we'll be scoring those proposals via committee, and then selecting after that. So it won't be on a first come basis, although I do encourage you to get your application in sooner than later, just in case there's any issues or anything that come up. But they will all be reviewed after the deadline. So another question that comes up a lot, number 4, certificates of good standing. So how recent should these certificates be, and where can organizations get these certificates? So the certificates come from the Secretary of State, which you can access a request for those records at this link here. I can put it into the chat so that you all can click on it and use it. In terms of how recent they should be within 90 days of the application opening. So within 3 months of February 28th, they should be that date timestamped. So if you don't have a current one now and you requested one through the Secretary of State portal, which I have here, you should be able to get it before the end of the deadline on April 29th. Typically their turnaround is like 3 weeks, I think, or even less. So I encourage you to do that as soon as possible. And number 5, can a nonprofit submit a new application each year to continue their program if awarded? The answer is yes. We have a competitive application process every fiscal year. So even if a granted organization applies, there's no promise that they will be awarded again. And if you had previously applied in previous cycles, please, I encourage you to apply again, because it can definitely happen that you'll be selected. So that is a competitive process every year, and I encourage you to apply. So we're going to go on to questions. I will check the chat and answer any questions you have. If you have any more questions, please submit them into the chat now. So first question from Mark, can you describe the metrics that reviewers will use to assess and award applications? For example, is there a scoring rubric we can see? We do use a scoring rubric. So like I said, it goes through multiple kind of steps of evaluation. So the first is the eligibility, which we're just checking for, did you submit all the documents? Are you 501c3, etc. And then it goes to committee review, which there is a scoring rubric. Unfortunately, we cannot share that just due to, we don't want folks kind of tailoring their proposals to our scoring matrix. So I encourage you to include as much quantitative and historical data that your organization has in the realm of financial empowerment. Think big about what you can do with the $200,000 grant amount, and you should be good on that side of it. So the third part about it, after the committee review, we send it through review through the commissioner's office as well as to the agency, and then the selected grantees are notified upon all of that different review process. Next question from Kim. Our program serves 16 to 29-year-olds. Can the grant be used for a specific population that we serve and their families versus the entire community? Yes, it can definitely be used for specific populations and their families. Please be, when you're describing the demographics that you're serving with your grant funding, I encourage you to be very specific if you have that kind of data. In particular, communities that tend to be higher percentage unbanked comparatively to the rest of the state. So we're talking like disabled, housing insecure, people of color, low income, new citizens. These are the populations that tend to be like 15 to 25% unbanked in the state, comparatively to like the 5 to 6% of the state overall. So we're really trying to target those kind of communities. So if you have that kind of data for your programs, I encourage you to include that in your proposal. Next question from Carmen. We serve artists who operate small businesses. Can we pay for professionals to support their efforts? So you, as part of the grant, you can use it to subcontract with, like, let's say a financial empowerment coach or some kind of service that you can use with your participants that would be relevant to the program. So if it's tailored to something and it's relevant to the program, then it would be allowable. I'm not sure exactly what the professional would be supporting in their efforts, but if it was specific enough in the sense that it was a professional that offered some kind of financial empowerment or financial wellness service, then that could be allowable. Next question from Esther. Should projects be for a 1-year period or is 2 years okay? So at the moment, we are on a fiscal year. So it's from July to June. So we're going to stick with the 1-year period. Is definitely preferable. I think we can have some flexibility in terms of exactly how that plays out on your program and when the disbursement of the funding comes. But the funded projects are all required to report annually on their grant projects. So in October of this year, I will be receiving the second year reports for an annual report that will be posted by the end of the year. The first year cycle is already posted on the website. If you all want to check that out in terms of what has been happening in the program. But definitely preferable to a 1-year period. Next question from Michaela. Can grant funds be used for small dollar loan capital? I'm assuming that's for like something like a lending circle. That would probably fall under the financial incentive sort of side of things. So I don't think that would be allowable, at least how I'm understanding it. If you have additional information about that, I encourage you to email me and I can talk about it with you offline. But if it were to be something like you were able to put in some kind of fund that participants were able to pull from, that probably would not be allowable under the current restrictions from the legislation. But please email me. I'd be happy to talk with you more about that in terms of specifics. Next question from Cindy. Overhead is capped at 15% of the grant, but what if overhead is integral to the program rollout? Does this count towards the 15%? So in terms of the overhead, we're talking about the administrative fees. So yes, that is capped at 15% of the total grant amount. We define administrative fees as indirect fees. So program, organizational sort of budget items that are not directly involved with your program that you're seeking funding for. So if you might want to look at your budget and make sure that your overhead is indirect. It's not direct program costs. I'm happy to talk about this offline, but direct costs are more like program supplies and salaries for direct program staff. Indirect would be like rent or equipment that your entire organization has that you would need to pay into in order for your program to use the funding. So indirect and direct is kind of how we're looking at it in terms of the administrative 15% cap. Next question from Brittany. What is the character or word count limit for the application questions? I would say try to keep it to 2 pages per question max. So I'd say that's about 1,000 words to 1,000 to 2,000 words would be the preferable limit. Next question from Talia. Could the grant be used for a technical assistant and stipends to nonprofit affordable housing providers to implement a financial capability program? Yes. That sounds like something that would be allowable if you're going to either develop or provide some kind of financial capability program to your existing programs. That is totally allowable. Next question from Kim. What is the estimated number to be served? I couldn't give you a direct number for this RFP. I can tell you from our first cycle, which there's an annual report that's been published, we served around 5,500 people, which about 3,500 of them were unbanked. So that was the first cycle. I hope to serve more with the increased funding. So hopefully it doubles, 10,000 or more, I'm hoping, but we shall see. Next question from Gardenia. How many certificates of good standing must be submitted? So if you are based in California, it's only one certificate that needs to be submitted, and that is through the Secretary of State of California. If you are a national nonprofit that's headquartered somewhere else in terms of a different state, then 2 certificates would be required to be submitted, one from California and then one from your home state, both of which need to be dated 90 days from the application date. Next question from Liza. Would laptops awarded to financial coaching participants count as financial incentives? Some program participants of ours need this technology to participate in remote one-on-one financial coaching and financial literacy workshops, and then for their new household budgeting, requesting credit scores, etc. I don't think that you could buy laptops that you could give to participants. That would not be an allowable program expense. However, you could buy laptops for your organization, which participants could then use, whether you lend that technology out or they use it as some kind of computer lab. Obviously, with pandemic related sort of issues, the lending program could work, but I think buying the laptops and then giving them to participants for them to keep would not be an allowable expense. Next question from Laura. Can our target audience be youth? Yes. Short and simple, yes. That is an allowable audience demographic. We have granted other organizations who serve primarily youth, and that's totally an allowable participant. Next question from Corrine. Can you please confirm that we can use grant funds to hire staff and that their wages and benefits are a direct cost in the budget? Yes. As long as that staff are direct program staff, then they could be used directly in the costs of the budget. If you're going to be hiring staff that will be indirectly helping with the program, then they would not be allowable to be put under the direct program or the direct program costs. So then they would be in the administrative, which would be capped at 15%. So it's important the distinction between are they going to be direct or indirect program staff when it comes to building your budget for this program. Next question from Akala. We intentionally keep our operation lean to save on costs. Our executive director is a company officer. Because of his passion for teaching financial literacy, he operates a workshop instructor. Would it be in violation if part of the grant were allocated toward his compensation for his direct teacher presentation role? No, that would not be a violation. He could, or they could be paid for their direct service if you break it down in terms of like hourly rate. And then you could estimate the amount of hours that they would be working on, and you can use that as a direct program cost. I think if you're going to talk about his in terms of their entire salary, I would say most of that's probably going to be indirect. So you need to break that into some kind of finite amount so that we could differentiate the indirect between the direct. In terms of how much, the 15% administrative fee would be the cap on the indirect. And in terms of direct costs, that's entirely up to you, up to the $200,000. Next question from CJ. Will grantees be required to report on all new quantitative items listed on the current year's grant report? For instance, reflect an increase in an individual's credit score? Yes, so grantees are required to report on their use of the funds annually. So they will get a template which outlines the kind of information that we need for our annual reports. So this last cycle was very heavy on the quantitative information, in particular information around financial well-being. So credit score, credit profile, savings, debt reduction, creating a budget or budget plan goal, and any other kind of quantitative measures of financial wellness. So those are all required. In order for the department to show that we are having impact in those areas and that we are indeed serving unbanked, underbanked populations with financial empowerment curriculum and programming, we need that quantitative information in addition to qualitative. So yes, that is a very important aspect of that. The application touches on that, but happy to talk about that. If you have any questions, please feel free to email. Next question from Carmen. Following up with a specific example, paying for a year of CPA services for a small group of artists businesses. Oh, okay, that was a question from earlier. I can get into specifics offline. Please just send me an email and I can give you a better answer on that one. Next question from Angela. Would you be able to expand on the attachment requirement letter from the board of directors? Do all members need to sign, or is just the board chair? Yes, so in terms of the letter from the board of directors, that would just need to be from either the board president or the chair. It doesn't need to be signed by every member of your board. And we use this in particular to show that you are indeed a 501c3 nonprofit and that no revenue from the organization benefits any individual. And these are all legislative required program eligibility requirements from the legislation, Senate Bill 455. So we do need a letter from your board of directors. Bylaws from your board are also encouraged to be included, as well as your articles of incorporation, and then your Form 990, as well as your letter from the IRS stating that you are indeed a 501c3 nonprofit. So those are all the different kind of documents that we use to ensure that the organization is indeed a 501c3. So next question from Veronica. Please provide the link in the chat for the certificate of good standing. Yes, I will do that. Well, give me 1 second. Can you define unbanked? Can it be for personal finance or business finance? So the way we define unbanked is indeed personal finance. And it's any individual or household who has not had a bank account in 12 months or more. So they could have had a bank at one point, or a bank account at one point in their life, but they have not been in a bank account for a year or more. That is, by definition, our definition, an unbanked individual. If that individual owns a business, then I guess that could maybe fall into business finance, but otherwise we're mostly focused on individuals and households with the programming. Kim, follow up to estimated number to be served. As a nonprofit, how many folks do we need to serve during the grant cycle? So we don't have a finite number that you have to serve. Obviously, we like to see a good number of folks being served with a program in proportion to the amount of money being asked. So I would just keep that in mind. Obviously, financial education, financial coaching is, especially with individual financial coaching, it's a pretty expensive prospect, and the number of participants goes down. So if you're able to show a really high amount of impact with a lower amount of participants, then that could equally be as good as someone who has a lot of participants but lower amount of impact. So just something to think about in terms of how you frame your proposal. Next question from Talia, just following up to confirm the answer to my question, using part of the funds to provide subgrants to nonprofits would be okay. No, so to clarify, the DFPI is the grantor. We cannot allow for nonprofits to then subgrant those to other nonprofits. What you can do is subcontract some of the money to like a professional organization that provides some kind of service. So like maybe some kind of legal legal group that provides expertise in a particular area that your organization does not have the capacity or employee knowledge in that area, so that you can subcontract that information out to an expert in the field. What you cannot do is subgrant the funding to other nonprofits who then can use the money how they please. So it's a subcontractual sort of relationship, not a subgrant. And that's important to note in terms of the language used if you plan on having a subgrantee. So next question with Esther, if applying with a partner, do we need to submit certificates of standing and other required attachments for both organizations, or only the lead applicant? So we're going to need just lead applicant. And the definition in terms of the subgrantee will need to be defined somewhat in terms of like how that partnership is going to work. I think that could work. It just depends on how the funding and the relationship in terms of how that funding kind of moves between the two of you is going to be important. So please email me. I'm happy to talk about this offline so that we can make sure that this will work for everyone. So next question from Jill. If awarded, does the funding need to be expanded in 1 year? Yes. Ideally, it would. Given that our RFP process is annual, and if you were to apply for the next cycle, we would want to at least see the results of your first. Obviously, there's some flexibility in there, but ideally, we would be sticking to 1 year, and a fiscal year would be fine. So I hope to have the grantees selected by July so that you would get your funding in August. And you would not need to report on that until the August of the next year. So that's kind of how the fiscal year is, or the grant year works at this moment. So next question from Michael, a qualification question. If a person has a bank account for more than 12 months, but is low income, person of color, needs financial education, etc., but has never used a payday loan, can they still qualify for the program, or do we have to turn them away? So that's a great question. You do not have to turn them away if they are not quote unquote unbanked, or they're not quote unquote underbanked. If they don't fall into those either, you can still serve them. Obviously, folks who have bank accounts still need help with this kind of curriculum, this kind of coaching. So absolutely, you could still serve folks who are not underbanked or unbanked. We are just looking for programs that are focusing on those particular participants, but they do not have to be. We're just focusing on them. So if you're serving low income people of color who need financial education, by all means, please have them be served through this program. Do not turn them away. Thanks for that question. That was a good question. Next question from Tame. Can you provide a link to the CalMoney? Yes. Hold on 1 second. I need to stop the sharing. All right, so here is the link to the Secretary of State for the Certificate of Good Standing. And then for the application, that is for the application. Last question from Danielle. We have a certificate of good standing dated June 6, 2021. No, that is not current enough. So we need it within 90 days of February 28th. So within 3 months of February 28, 2022 is going to be the requirement for the certificate of good standing. All right. Thank you all for the questions. I'm going to share my screen once more. Where is it? Here we go. So please, if you haven't already, check out our dfpi.ca.gov website if you want to learn more about the DFPI. And then please, if you haven't already, subscribe to the newsletter. I'll be sending out a lot of the updates through there. And then if you have any questions, I mentioned to a number of you, please email me about specifics about the question you had. That's the email, calmoneysmart@dfpi.ca.gov. That is monitored. I will be on that answering questions from applicants. So if you have any questions about your application, about the program, about the DFPI, please email me. I'm happy to chat anytime about your questions. Also, please follow us on social media. There's also plenty of interesting content and program-related information coming out on our Facebook page at facebook.com/CalMoneySmart. Also encourage you to follow the DFPI because we do a lot of financial empowerment work as a department. We're here to protect consumers. So if you're interested in the CalMoneySmart program, you probably have some alignment with our department as well. So I encourage you to follow them as well. All right, that concludes our webinar. Thank you all for listening in and participating. I will put the email in the chat. Yeah, like I said, please email me if you have any questions. I'm here for you, and I'm happy that you all are interested in the program. And I look forward to working with you soon. Thank you, everyone.